I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits from up high and low. Cinema classics on.
This special edition of Cinema Classics celebrates Ohio Goes to the Movies, a signature event of America 250 Ohio, and is co-produced by John DeSando and Mary Yerina, and hosted by Mary Yerina. Listen to shows Thursdays at 8:01 p.m. on WCBE 90.5 FM. And listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm your host, Mary Yerina.
And I'm Kimber Perfect.
And this is Cinema Classics. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mary.
Happy to be celebrating Ohio Goes to the Movies with you. And you were an enthusiastic acceptance of my invitation because I picked a film. I had a film on the list that you love. Tell us about It Happened One Night.
Oh, It Happened One Night, a Frank Capra film from 1934. This film has always been among my top 5 favorite classic movies. But I will tell you, and I've seen it many times over the years, but not for a while until I saw it the other day. And I can tell you, this rom-com holds after nearly 100 years. I'm a rom-com fan, and this has to be, if not the first romantic comedy made in film. Certainly among the first, but I will tell you, it holds today. I would hold it up to When Harry Met Sally, Notting Hill, any of them.
And I would agree. And I have to say, I chose this film because of the Ohio connection to Clark Gable, who was born and raised here. But it's a film that I love so much that I actually bought the DVD.
Oh my goodness.
And so I still had it. I still have a DVD player, so I can watch it whenever I want. But the thing that I found fascinating about watching it again to have this conversation with you is I really focused on how the film was crafted. You know, we're in the early age of talkies. Films are still in black and white. And this was made during the studio system where they had actors under contract. They churned films out. Actors were making sometimes up to 10 films a year because the turnaround time, in this case for this film, was 4 weeks. So it's really shot scene to scene to scene to scene. And I noticed the fade in and fade out, black and white. So we really don't have a lot of movement other than the one scene where Claudette Colbert as Ellie Andrews is walking through the camp
To the
showers. And that's really the only movement scene we have in the whole film. But Ellie is a runaway bride, if you will. She's the daughter of a tycoon banker. And
who's great in the film, by the way.
Yes.
The father.
Yes, Walter Donnelly, who we'll talk about a little bit later as well. He, so she has married somebody that he does not approve of, and he's trying to convince her to annul the marriage. She escapes from him and is trying to make her way to New York to reunite with her now husband, King Leslie. And the traditional tropes that we think of now for the screwball comedy really develop through her character and the character of Clark Gable, Peter Warren. When they come together, he recognizes who she is and agrees to help her get to New York for an exclusive story because he's a newspaper man. So what were your thoughts when you first saw Clark Gable on Enter the Story as Peter Warren?
So in classic rom-com style, they start off intensely disliking each other, you know, and what romantic comedy, or screwball comedy for that matter, doesn't start off that way. I think one of the early lines of When Harry Met Sally, Sally says, the first time I met Harry, you know, I couldn't stand him or something like that. So anyway, they have this, not necessarily a cute meet because they intensely dislike one another. And he doesn't recognize her right away. Remember, this is 1934. The newspapers with her photo plastered all over it probably hadn't been printed yet. But when he does, and that's early on in the film, he right away kind of does the right thing. He's a gentleman, even though he can be a real jerk and towards her and kind of nasty at times. And in part, I saw that develop more so. I think the more he fell for her, the more annoyed he got with the whole situation because he was falling in love with her but knew that this was out of his reach. At least that's what I read in between the lines. But yeah, so then he kind of strikes a deal with her rather than keeping it a secret that he knows to hold out for that $10,000 reward. And I liked how he approached it with her. They kind of became partners in this effort.
Right.
He was going to help her get back to King, and he was going to get the award. So, and a scoop. He actually, more than the money, he really cared about the scoop.
Right. He's a journalist who, we meet him, he's on the phone with his editor, and his editor has basically fired him. But his, I guess, peers surrounding him fall for the fact that even though the editor has hung up on him, Peter basically turns the tables and says, "I quit."
Yes.
So he's lauded by his peers as he walks to the night bus to New York. So it's a funny start to the film. And I will say, even though I think it holds true today, there are parts of the film in terms of how nasty he can be towards her that maybe don't feel as comfortable, but in the context of a screwball comedy or a rom-com, they all work because he is getting more frustrated as he falls in love with her. I totally agree with that. But I think he also starts to realize that there's more to her than just the stereotype that he has, that she's this spoiled, rich brat. And she actually makes the case that she really isn't a brat because she never gets her way, and that she's been in this controlled environment her entire life, and she really wants to break out of it and live life. And one of the first scenes we see where she relaxes as they're on this long bus journey together is, as was typical at the time, that's how you traveled. People started singing songs and sing The Man on the Flying Trapeze, and she starts really enjoying herself, probably for the first time since we've seen the film. But he does come to her rescue because she's not familiar with the ways of the world because she has been sheltered. She expects the bus driver to wait for her. And luckily, he waits for her to help her and they have to catch the next bus.
Yeah, because she left her ticket.
And she left her ticket exactly on the seat.
There had to be a ruse for him to have waited. I mean,
That's true. Not just out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah. But that was also at the same time he realizes who she is because he sees the paper.
Exactly. And then there's also a couple of famous scenes where he's teaching her the ways of the world. And there are two I'm going to cite, which I'm sure will pop to your mind, if not our audience's mind, is the famous teaching her how to dunk a donut.
Oh, yes.
And the how do you hitchhike scene. So tell us a little bit about those scenes.
So they have shared the first infamous motel room at an auto park, I think they call them in the movie.
Yeah.
And they've strung, he's strung up the rope and the blanket and all of that.
The Walls of Jericho.
The Walls of Jericho, yes. And which two very famous scenes from this movie, the Walls of Jericho and the hitchhiking scene. So Mary's brought up both of them brilliantly. So he goes out and gets breakfast, 1 egg for her, 1 egg for him, and there's this little kitchenette in this motel room. So he comes in, "What, you're not up yet?" And so he starts readying and getting breakfast together, and he's got donuts. Now there's a plate of 4 donuts on the table first. But when they sit down to eat, there's only 2. I noticed that.
Good editing catch.
I know.
That continuity
I could have been a
issue.
movie editor. So anyway, but there are just 2. They each, because he's rationing out, they have very little funds. And he sees her dunk like half of the donut into her coffee.
And leaves it there.
Yeah,
Leaves
yeah,
it
yeah.
soaking.
And he just says, that's no way. So he's it's an example of him teaching her the ways of the real world. And so then she breaks off that half. He shows her how to do it with the quick dunk. And she breaks off the soggy half and just dunks the one real quickly. And then, they move on because the bus is leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in the film, when they're hitchhiking, and there's a whole series of things that happen, how they end up off the bus. But he's bragging, this is when he's really starting to fall for her, and he wants to show her the kind of man he is. And he's got all these techniques for hitchhiking, and none of them work. And she's just laying on a fence post, by gosh. And she goes, okay. So again, this is a woman, she didn't even know what hitchhiking was when he first brought it up. And so anyway, she goes out and sticks her leg out. A very famous, even if you haven't seen the movie, you have seen Claudette Colbert stick out her leg, pull up her skirt with her stocking feet and her high heels, and the car comes to a screeching halt for them.
Her own method. So interestingly, this was a film that had a hard time getting made at first. And we'll talk a little bit more about the casting in our podcast, Double Take, which I hope our listeners will join us for. And we'll specifically talk about Clark Gable, Ohio's son, when we continue our conversation. So what would you recommend to our listeners with regards to It Happened One Night?
Well, if you don't have the CD, like Mary, I would pull it up on Amazon Prime. That's how I watched it. The first time I watched it, because I watched it twice over the weekend, it was $1.67 on Amazon Prime. But over the weekend, the price went up because I watched it again last night and it was like $3.99. So I'm telling you, this movie, I laughed throughout the movie. Now, I was put off by some of the gender, specific stuff. Her father slaps her like minutes into the film, and more than one occasion, Clark Gable references punching her in the face. I mean, he doesn't actually ever hit her, but those kinds of things really rubbed me the wrong way. But other than that, I mean, it's an absolutely delightful film. The acting is superb. Claudette Colbert and Clark Gable together in this movie is amazing. And you're right about the cinematography, because Frank Capra really focuses in on the two principals, but there's all this stuff happening in the background, in the bus depot, at the camp, as you say, going to the showers, and there's just this activity. And I love the breaking out in song, and that on the bus wasn't the only time we had that breaking out in song. My mother used to tell me, my mother was born in 1927, and she used to say when she was growing up in the 30s and 40s, that men and women would just walk down the streets of downtown Columbus and sing. They would just break out into song and sometimes even dance, and my mother was a dancer. So that reminded, the Flying Trapeze song and the driver breaking out into song as he was driving them down the road before he ran off with their suitcase. It just reminded me of my mother, which was a pleasant thing as well.
Aww. Well,
I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits from up high.